To understand the real motives behind New Zealand's speech policing, I'm taking a look at the kind of conversation our leaders obstructed from taking place here.
The entire financial system, which is not a free market system, but central government, it's a currency as a giant government program, relies on the value of real estate staying high. And we saw what happened when there was a little bit of a dip in the value of real estate in America in 2007, 2008. The entire system almost came apart, and they had to pump $700 billion of taxpayer money into the bank coffers, which was an utterly immoral and wrong thing to do. So when you have a baby boom, you get huge demand for housing, right? Of course, we know this from the boomers after the Second World War, and that creates a big burst in housing and all of that. And then you get a hollowing out with the next generation, and that's going to cause the value of real estate to drop, which is what millennials should be experiencing, because there's fewer of them than there were of boomers. But the problem is that the banks right now have their assets in real estate. So if the demand for housing goes down, then the value of the bank's assets goes down, and they usually have a 30-to-1 asset to lending ratio. And so they really have to call in a lot of loans, they have to pull back on their economic activity, or they go bankrupt. And so one thing that immigration is doing is by constantly bringing people into the country and giving them taxpayer money with which to buy housing, you're propping up the value of housing, of cheaper housing, and then people fly out of those neighborhoods because they're dangerous or unfamiliar, and it pushes up the whole price of housing, which maintains the asset value sheets of the banks. Now, if there is a drop in the value of housing, the whole Ponzi scheme of modern finance falls apart. So immigration doesn't have anything to do with skills shortages. It has to do with just, we need to prop up the value of real estate, and we need to create this delusion that somehow there are going to be enough workers to pay for the boomers' retirements because the governments have promised things that they can't pay for. And generally what governments do, when they make promises they can't pay for, when the bill comes due, they go to war.
So, it's nothing to do with cultural diversity, but more with increasing the asset value for rich bankers. This leaves the next generation with sky-high mortgages and rents with not enough left to improve grotty, dilapidated accommodation. Similar happened to me in the UK, where I was paying more than half my income on mortgage interest alone.
It's a really scary prospect for me as a millennial to think of, if they just opened the borders to anyone to come in to take these jobs, there are millions and millions and millions of people that are going to come in, and they'll do these jobs for $5, for $3, for $2. And what's going to happen to all of the workforce that the liberal far-left governments claim to support, claim that they're standing for them? Well, they're going to disappear. We're not going to be able to get good jobs, because there will be people that will literally be willing to do it for slave labor wages. We criticize China for that, and yet we do massive business with them without good trade deals. You want to bring that into this country? Like,
well, here's the thing too. If immigration is reduced, let's say, you are giving a massive pay rise to everyone in Australia. Because when immigration is reduced, the price of real estate goes down. And also you're giving people back their time because, as you know, immigrants overwhelmingly live in cities, right? They don't go, it's not like people are immigrating into Australia to farm the back 40 of the outback, right? I mean, they're coming to the cities, which means infrastructure burdens, which means traffic problems, which means healthcare issues, because, you know, they're going to get sick and they're going to, right? So if you say, okay, well, we're going to nurture our homegrown talent, then your requirement for all of these things goes down. The traffic will go down, real estate prices will go down. Everyone benefits from that in the long run. Is there going to be a transition? Well, sure. But you'd be amazed at how well people will learn things and how quickly will learn things if there's a pot of gold on the other side. I think the Australians that I've met so far, yourself included, intelligent, resourceful, energetic, curious, they'll cover the skills gap in no time at all, and everyone else gets the bonus of lower real estate prices. I mean, the place that we're staying.
These insights are disconcerting. Are you sure those nice Labour MPs that you voted for are standing up for your interests, or perhaps receiving funding with some ulterior objectives?
Well, not everyone. What about the people who already own the houses?
That is a very fair point. But they're not selling their houses. That's a paper loss, right? Only if they sell their houses does that loss manifest. But the place that we're staying is like some old factory, and I won't get into any details, but it's kind of rickety, kind of creaky, kind of old. $1.1 million for one of these places.
Yeah.
That is mental, and there's absolutely no reason for it. We have a
There
baby
is-
bust. The prices should be falling.
Right, but I mean, a lot of Sydney's and Melbourne's price hikes are because of not migrants, but because it's Chinese.
Sure.
Chinese super wealth.
And can Australians go and buy up a lot of China, or is that not allowed? Can Australians go and move to China and live there? You don't have reciprocal agreements with these countries that I'm aware of. So it's a lopsided, one-sided deal that is to the detriment in the long run of Australia and to the advantage of China. Why doesn't your government negotiate reciprocity agreements so that there can be a back and forth of these kinds of resources? I don't think that's happening. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, no, I mean, we can't exactly negotiate something on equal terms with China because we're entirely dependent on them for trade.
That means that they're dependent also upon you for trade. Of course you can
no
negotiate
way.
with... Oh, so if you can't negotiate with the country, why the hell are you letting its citizens buy up your land and country?
Yep.
If you can't even negotiate with them, then you can at least block them from buying up all of your land and country.
Well, that doesn't sound like a very balanced business deal to me.
Australia was the only Western country that didn't go into recession during the GFC.
No, that's not true. Canada did not go into a recession.
Okay, well, we had the highest growth rate out of the West, and it was almost entirely because we dug up shit from the ground and sold it to China.
Good. Well, then you can trade with China. That doesn't mean that you have to allow the
We can
Chinese to
sell
buy
to
up.
China,
Yeah.
but only if they want it.
Sure.
As in, they're setting terms. We're not going to the table as equal partners.
Do you think massive foreign ownership of significant resources in Australia from a pretty hostile government that has been known to spy on Western governments like crazy, do you think that that's going to pose any problems? Do you think it's worth having a recession, maybe just to not have that as a problem in the future?
I mean,
Having a totalitarian dictatorship own huge sections of your country? That just seems like I'll take a recession over that myself.
I mean, there are checks and balances to foreign ownership, and they've been rejected several times in terms of foreign ownership.
Now,
on the
who's
basis-
rejecting them and who's funding that rejection?
The government, based on intelligence agencies' assessments of national security risk.
Do you think that the average white Australian would prefer there to be less Chinese ownership of Australia?
Probably, but that's you bringing the race into it now.
You brought up China, not me, man. I said Chinese, which is a country, not a race. Oriental would be the race, or East Asian.
It would be.
We do have to leave.
Now, I seem to remember a few years back with politicians abusing their positions of trust to further their own business interests in China. Let's take a look at what New Zealand media have to say about this.
A major research paper into the extent of China's influence on New Zealand politics and society has uncovered widespread links between former politicians, their families, and significant political donations.
I won't reproduce the full report here, as you can follow it on their website. And this presentation is on grounds of fair use for the purpose of discussion and critique. Bye then.